Alright, so I'm starting to work on Rosie today, and the first thing I need to work on is some undergarments because I am going off of historical techniques and historical silhouette-ish. I have placed her at about like, she's turn of the century-ish. She's based on Hello Dolly, who is from 1880, and then she's kind of showing signs of being like as late as 1905. So turn of the century-ish. So one of the elements I want to have, because of her very cartoony silhouette, and just because of the way some of the garments in this little bit of a span of a time period look, I want to give her a bum pad with the petticoat, bum and hip pad, so it's actually 3 pieces. One that's in the middle and 2 that are along the hips that are a little bit smaller, and they're basically like little pillows that are worn around the waist to give that silhouette. And I feel like it will complement the character's original artwork, but also the historical references I'm going with. So very 1890s looking. So the first thing I need to do is to make the little pieces. So I have done some measurements and I've made some basic pieces. So this is the bum one, and these are the little hip pieces. So basically I'm going to make them like little pillows. I am going to top stitch the edges, little channels of sorts, and that kind of gives it a little stiffening. I see this a lot in bum pads that exist now to this day. And I've used the same twill actually I used on my corset that I made a few years ago, because I have some left, but the stiffness will actually kind of help that the top stitching and for holding its shape and stuff. The top stitching also keeps it so that it doesn't just be a big pad and then go off. It makes it so it's a little bit more smooth after I stuff it a little bit. This will create that shape that I need, and then from there I can start creating the undergarments based on the measurements I get from this. And luckily I'm able to reuse a lot of the other undergarments. So there's only 2 undergarments I'm going to have to make specifically for this costume, which is fantastic because technically there's a little bit of a crunch to this costume. So let's start making these little bum pads by sewing pieces together good side to good side, turning it inside out, top stitching the edges, and then stuffing it and closing it. Then I'll get on to the cording and stuff after that, but first make them into actual little pillows. Okay, so I have my little bum pad situation, bum and hip pad situation made, figured out. It works, it's good to go, which means I can start working on the petticoat. So, what I'm planning on actually using for the petticoat is actually an old bed skirt, because it has this really great ruffle edge on it. And I've gone and done some measurements, and I think I know how I want to tackle doing this petticoat. So the plans are very flat in the front, likely just a darted piece that I'm likely gonna drape onto my mannequin to make the front pattern pieces. And then I'll go in with a very large square piece to make the back. And I have some measurements and some predictions and such on how I want to make this. So first I'm gonna just quickly drape up some shapes on my mannequin with some extra fabric. And once I have something that I'm thinking is working, and then I'm gonna go in, cut out some pieces, and serge some edges. My prediction is that I will have 1 main skirt body and then 2 layers of ruffle. This will be the outer ruffle, and the inner ruffle will also have some horsehair hem on it. Now for this entire project, I am combining modern techniques with historical techniques, so historical-ish shape of the petticoat, and then with some of this on the hem of the ruffle should add some really good body to it and structure as well, because yeah, this is a cartoony character. I want it to have some cartoony elements, so the petticoat having some volume is definitely welcome. I am predicting a front skirt piece that has some darts on it and is very straight up and down, and then I predict a lot more volume on the back and having to play around a little bit with the length of the back, because I want the ruffle to be mostly parallel, but we'll also see, because I do want the whole skirt to have a train. Okay, so I now have a draped petticoat here. It's doing the thing we want. There's more party in the back, flatter in the front, with a little bit of gather going into the side. I'm actually really happy with the shape. I'm really happy with the length. And now I'm going to take this bed skirt and turn it into the real thing of this. So I need to cut out these pieces out of it, and then I need to remove the skirt, like this part, to make the ruffle, and whatever is left will be a secondary ruffle. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually cut out my pattern pieces based on the pieces that I've made here. A lot of it is going to be pulling and ripping, and then I'm going to get my serger out and serge all the edges. I'm not doing fancy French seams or anything on this. I'm just gonna kind of go with the flow. Let's get this petticoat, like the real, the good copy made. Alright, so it's a few hours later, I now have a stack of pieces that have all been serged, including the big old ruffle, which is on the ground. This thing is very long, but honestly, I'm really glad that I picked this all off of the bed skirt because it's really pretty and I think it's gonna actually add some really good volume. So now the first thing I'm gonna do is, there's two tiers to this petticoat essentially. There's the skirt layer and then there's the big old ruffle layer. So the first thing I'm going to do is create the bottom tier, which there's two of. So the first thing, I'm gonna close off this seam and then that ruffle is, I can just put it aside for now. And then I'm going to start putting, there's multiple seams that make up the other ruffle. I'm going to start to piece these all together, and then both ruffles will be in essentially big old loops. Once those are in loops, I'm going to give a little bit more attention to this plain ruffle. This will be going underneath the prettier one, and this one's going to get some horsehair hem on it. So the horsehair hem is actually left over from other projects. I measured it out and I do have enough to add to this. So I'm going to add 2 rows of it. One to the very hem of the loop and one to the middle. So for the bottom one, I'm essentially treating it like a facing. So I'm sewing it right sides together, all around the edge, pressing it up, stitching it down again, and then I stitch down the top to keep it nice and flat so it doesn't fall over and such like that. And then that makes a really pretty faced hemmed edge. It's actually a really pretty finish for a hem and I really like doing it this way. I did it on a few of my cosplays now and I like facings just in general, but I do love a horsehair facing. And then I'm going to add another layer around the middle of the piece as well, just to give it a little bit extra volume and body to really push that upper ruffle out a little bit. This is not a historical thing, but it is in a way based on historical. They wouldn't be using plastic horsehair hem, of course, but they sometimes would use cording on their petticoats to give them a little bit more volume. They would use cording, they would use pin tucks, they would use all these sorts of things. So I'm kind of doing a similar concept, but using a modern version of it, which I think is kind of fun. That's the current direction of this petticoat. I'm going to check in once I have both of my loops finished. Okay, so I've made a bit of progress since I've last checked in. So first thing I've noticed is that I am going to have to sew these together a little bit because if I don't, they split up and then the fabric just kind of falls in between and we don't want that. So that's just a minor thing I'm gonna have to do just to kind of fix that. It's dying, my camera's dying. Okay, I just changed my batteries because it was dying. Anyway, back to what I was explaining. So bum pad, figured out a little fix I need to do and that's great and it will fix the problem actually quite well. Now on to the petticoat. So I have now gone to my machine, I put 2 layers of basting threads through both the pretty ruffle layer, the one with all the eyelet lace, and the layer that I have the horsehair hem on. I've pulled on the bobbin thread and that gathered up the fabric, and now there's all this nice volume, which I have now pinned to the bottom of my petticoat piece. So this is the upper piece and the bottom ruffly pieces. So they're now together, evenly distributed across this whole thing here. There's a lot of it. So now I'm just gonna take it over to my sewing machine and just going to sew it down, stitch it down, press the heck out of it afterwards to keep it lying nicely. And then I think I'm actually going to take some horsehair hem and stitch some just above the seam allowance of all of this, partially to help keep the petticoat with some shape. So it keeps some shape up here, and also just to kind of strengthen it as well, because right now a lot of the shaping is being done only at the bottom. So this should help keep some shape and keep some volume on the upper half of the petticoat as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for now. I'm going to take my time so I don't break any needles, because I am going through a lot of fabric, but I am using a machine that's from the 70s, and they are built so well, so it should be fine to sew through all of these layers. But we shall see how long this takes me to do. So hello, welcome to my floor. It's a few days after YetiCon. I'm finally back at working on Rosie. So we have a beautiful finished little petticoat here. I tried it on with the hip pad and everything, and it worked out perfectly. I am off to the patterns for the physical costume that we see on top, because all the other undergarments I have looked after. I'm actually gonna start with drafting the skirt. I have not purchased the fabrics yet because I would like to know how much fabric I'm going to need. I have ideas of how much I'm gonna end up using, but I would actually like to pattern draft it out and figure out exactly what I need. So I have my sketch notes out here. I have a copy of
Dress Pattern Designing by Natalie Bray out, which is the book we used in school. It has a really interesting method for drafting an initial skirt block very quickly. So I'll probably use that and then make it into and like alter the skirt from there. And I also have Historical Pattern Archive out because it has patterns from turn of the century that have just about the shape that I want for this. So basically what I'm gonna go in and do, I think I'm just gonna do it on my floor. There's space here. I think I'm just gonna start the draft on the ground, as you do. My plan is for a gored skirt. So there should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 gores, I believe is the plan. Well, there'll be 4 pattern pieces, but that will make 7 pieces that get sewn together to make this. So the plan is that it's going to be pretty straight up and down with a little bit of flare added to the front pieces, even more flare to the back. Most center back piece will ideally have a lot of like volume that will get pleated into the back waist for that volume, just so it has a little bit of that training effect. I also do want to lengthen it in the back a little bit. That's where I'm at the moment. I'm going to lay out some pattern paper on the floor, look at some of my references here, and get to work. So this is where I'm at on the pattern draft. I have it just on my mannequin at the moment. So it started off as a very rectangular piece. The front piece is very slim. There's a slight fisheye effect at the knee area, and it goes out. Fisheye effect over here as well. That will hopefully really tulip out the skirt. And honestly, just screw this way. I think it's working. The bottom is going to be cut off later. I'm going to flare it so it really comes out. Again, that cartoony shape we're going for. But this is making the shape I kind of want. It's subtle, it's not too much, it's not too cartoony, but it's enough that it's like really pretty. But let's be real, that's the star of the show. That is, I know that right now my fan is catching it. But there is a lot of volume back here because this is the center back. So this would all be out here. So a lot more volume in the back. It looks a lot more form-fitting in the front, which is exactly what I wanted. I'm really happy with how this pattern is looking. I can't wait to add some flare to the bottom there. I think that'll be the next step that I do. I'll cut off the bottom there, cut these all up, because right now it's actually one big piece, because that's the easiest way to get a draft. And that's how I made sure the hems, the side seams, everything was working well together. But yeah, this is looking honestly better than I expected. So that's awesome. I might fisheye back here a bit more just to make it more dramatic. I'm not sure yet, but it's fisheyed less than the other ones, but it's looking good. Wow, look at that. Look what the fan's doing. So yeah, this is looking really good. I'm really happy with this so far. My room is a mess because pattern drafting requires the entire floor, but you know, it's working. I'm really happy with how it's looking. The only reason I haven't shown the process of working on it is because it's really awkward working on the floor. The cats are all over, but you know, we're getting places on this. All right, so it has been a little while since I've done any form of check-in or anything, and that is because I've been working on mock-ups and patterns and stuff like that, and it is very hard to film stuff when I'm already having hard enough time like actually like doing self-fittings and stuff like that. So I do have the mock-up over here, including the hat, which is falling apart because it's just a paper and tape hat. But we have the bodice, which is actually based on my Sakizo bodice, so it's a similar pattern to that. The little bolero on top, and the skirt as well. Pieces that I'm actually really happy with now, and that's the important part of this step. I love the shape I have, I love the silhouette I have, and I love the volume I've gotten into this skirt. Like, this is so satisfying. It's got the exact shape I wanted. Almost mermaidy effect in the front, because these pieces are rounded out a little bit. You can see it right here where it comes in a little bit, very, very gently, just a little bit. Very gently comes in and then comes back out again, just like tulip walking skirts would do in the time period. And again, I have my hat pattern hanging out over here. Now I'm at the point where I am waiting, because that is always a step when you have to order all your fabric, because there's no fabric stores where you live. So this is some of the swatches of fabric that I've ordered and I'm just waiting on. This is for about the bolero and the upper area of the skirt. So this will be acting as a lining. It is a polyester based fabric. It's actually the same fabric I use on my Yona cosplay for the belt piece. And that will be acting as a flat lining for this really lovely satin brocade that has roses on it, which I think is just so perfect because her name's Rosie. And I like to add some texture to my cosplays. And then I have this perfect shade of red for all those brighter red areas that are less burgundy, less wine colored. And then not a great lining, but a lining option that will be for the facing area of the skirt, because Of course, the skirt will have a little bit of drag on the ground, so we do want to have some kind of facing. So this will make everything slip right off of it, even if it's going to be a bit of a pain to use. So yeah, I'm waiting on those fabrics, and now I guess what I can actually work on is start the hat, because I ordered buckram and hat making supplies quite a while ago. So now at least I can start that. How I'm going to start it is first I'm going to go over to my iron and start to press out the buckram because it was folded when it arrived. So I'm going to reshape it so it's nice and flat. I'm going to take apart my mock-up here, take all the pieces apart because that is also my working pattern, and just start to cut out all the pieces. There are three. There is the brim of the hat, there is the hat band, and then there's the tip. Now, a lot of people who have been making Rosie cosplays, I've been noticing a lot of them doing a rounded top of the hat, which also really works really well. I think it's because we're very familiar with sun hats and they're big and floppy and stuff like that. But I want to go based a little bit off of historical hats, and a lot of them in this time period, around the turn of the century, were flat on the top. Merry Widow hats were often very flat on the top, and I am basing this off of like the Merry Widow hat because it is a very oversized hat and just covered in feathers. I also find the name Merry Widow is very delightful because of the nature of Rosie being cannibal lady. Very fun, and I love it. So yeah, I'm gonna cut out some buckram. I might play around with some shaping and stuff. I don't think I will yet. Some pieces, the hat band piece will need to be sewn down and together so it stays together, and then I'm going to take some of my millinery wire and add it to the edges of the hat. This is to give it structure, this is to give it some body, and after this I will be kind of stuck for a little while because I still have to wait on other fabrics to keep working on this darn thing. But yeah, I can at least start by cutting out the buckram and getting the wire sewn on. It should actually take me quite a bit of time too because, well, wire and all that, it's all hand sewing. And the brim is very large on this. I also might have to put a band in the middle as well. As for references and such, if anyone also wants to make something like this, I am referencing a specific book, From the Neck Up, A Guide to Hat Making. They have all the millinery steps in here, as well as advice for certain styles of hats and such, and patterns, which is what I went off of as well, because heads are not completely perfectly circular, they're more like ovals, so that is how I started my pattern for all of this. Anyway, I'll be using this book for all the different steps I need, and we will be going from there. Let's get this thing cut out and wired. Alright, so I have recently gotten a lot of progress done on the hat. My fabrics have now come in, but because I already had so much on the hat kind of going already, I've decided to continue on the hat pieces. Recently I have gotten these completely fabric covered, and also I have now covered the edges with interfacing. It keeps the wire all nice and clean and all encased very, very nicely. And honestly, the whole piece looks really, really satisfying now. It's really starting to take shape as a hat. Of course, it's in two pieces, but you know, we're getting the look we're going for, and I'm really excited about it. So the next thing I need to do now is actually start to fabric cover it. So my fabric has come in recently. It is this gorgeous, gorgeous brocade with roses on it, because it's Rosie. The next thing I need to do is actually cover this piece with fabric. So the first thing I do is I'm going to hand baste very big basting stitches outward, from middle to out, to get this nice and smooth so it fits that lovely curve that we have going on the hat. And then I'm going to start to hand stitch down the edges around the inside of the hat, usually with a cross stitch most likely. This way, this is the traditional way of doing it, and it's the way I personally like doing it, like the way it sits and finishes on the hat in the end. It's gonna take me a little while. I have learned that going around the entire edge does take quite a bit of time because this is a decently large hat. So I've set up in my dining room for the day, so I have a nice flat surface to work from on this hand stitching. It should take me quite a bit of time, I think, to do this, but we'll see how it goes from there. Whenever I get this done, I'm planning on covering the the tip and the hat band pieces. That goes on very similarly, but in this case I put the tip on first and I stab stitch it down to the base hat, and then afterwards cover it with the hat band. I like the way it's done by hand. I just really like the traditional millinery techniques, and I'm really happy to finally be doing a project that requires them. So I've been having a lot of fun on this. I've been enjoying a lot of the handwork I've been doing, and it's time for me to continue doing it. So I'm gonna pop on some, most likely The Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings for today, because I'm in that kind of mood, and I'm gonna get going. Okay, so there's a coaster under here. Anyway, so I have the hat and the top of the hat already covered now. It is very nicely finished on the inside here with this nice stitch. Really happy with how it looks, really happy with the amount of progress I got done. But now it's time to put the other side on, which you can see the other fabric hanging out here a little bit. What I have gone and done off camera, because I was just working on stuff otherwise, I have added heat and bond to the other side, because sometimes in millinery on the inside you would glue things down so that when it's up like this, right, you don't want the fabric sagging, because if you only sew it down here and here, you might get some sagging here depending on the shape of your hat. So the heat and bond keeps it all nice and flat and attached, so when it's upside down and being worn, it's not falling off. So now I just need to go ahead and finish all these edges. So I'm going to do that, and then once this is all done, I can actually attach the top part. So basically I'm going to be folding over all of these little edges. I might have to cut some of them down, so I brought some scissors down with me. I'm gonna fold it over, hand press it a little bit, and then I'm going to simply slip stitch it down. I probably will have to use the curved needle again, we'll see. But this gives me enough space so I have a nice finished edge, and then I have a very nice finished piece here. I might be able to finish this part today, and that would be really wonderful. I'm getting close to finishing the hat, which is actually very exciting. The hardest parts are now behind me, so I'm going to turn on some more Tolkien movies and get working, because I'm having a lot of fun working on this. It is on my head. It is looking like an actual physical hat now that all the pieces are together. It sits really nicely, like at the top of my head. I can feel it right here. It is looking really good, and I'm really happy with it so far. But it is still not done before. I can not even get the decorations yet. That's not what I mean. I need to put this lining in there. So what I have done, the lining is one of the only actual machine sewn pieces. So I've sewn up the back seam, and then I went over to the machine and sewed on the top and the band lining. So I put them together, which is a bit of a pain because sewing circles to a cylinder can be a little tricky, but I got it first try, which is really, really nice. And now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the hat upside down, place this inside the hole essentially that is left there, and I'm going to start to hand stitch it down to the inside of the hat. So that also acts as another point of contact, and finally encloses all the raw edges of this hat into one area. So all the raw edges, all of it will be done, and the hat, the base hat, will then be complete, and then I can start working on all the decorations. I am loving how it's looking so far, and still on my little Lord of the Rings marathon as I work on this. I'm now on the 2 towers, and so I'm gonna get some of that hand sewing done with my curved needle, and then I guess it's time to start decorating. Okay, so I've made a lot of progress on my hat recently, and a lot of it was stuff I just couldn't film because it was kind of like awkward angles and stuff, and I didn't want to do awkward angles. I was just powering through it. So this is where my hat is currently at, and I'm really, really happy with it. It's not even fitting into frame. So it is now, has these little details on it, it's lined, has the feathers on it. And I mean, just look at the shape of that now. So basically what I did was I have 4 different kinds of feathers on here. I have an ostrich feather here. I believe this is a standard like a wing feather of a chicken. These are rooster tail feathers. And I also have rooster saddleback feathers here. And so reasoning for each of them, ostrich feathers are nice and big, and that's kind of what was used when you have that big fan of feathers on the top, like Rosie has. And I've used these little ones because they're closer more to her accurate colors, but also I kind of like the faded look. It gives the feathers on the front a little bit more dimension. So both feathers kind of work together, and this covers the little stalks that are there. Every single feather on here is sewn into place. So the lining inside is thoroughly sewn into place now. That is how many feathers were done back then. You're not supposed to be able to see much of the stitching lines, but they are hidden under all the feather fluff, so you don't just see a bunch of stitches on top. And you can sew through the stalks a little bit to keep the stitches in nice and sturdy. So for each feather, I would sew in the stalk and then around it a few times in the stalk and then close it off, which is what I did on the back ones as well. And they're mostly on the side here, except for some of these really long ones. So this one, where first I actually sewed the feathers together. So this is actually 3 feathers sewn together. You can kind of see the point where they're sewn together right there. And then there's one over here to make it an extra long feather for that tail effect that you kind of see on her hat. And then finally we have these saddleback feathers, which are also sewn into place. And I have these on the side kind of as filler to make it more textured, but also these guys move around a lot more. They're squiggly, they're really, really interesting looking. And to me, they kind of look tentacly. They kind of look demonic-ish, considering this character is friends with someone who has these weird like demonic tentacles and stuff, and they're a very similar kind of demon in the story. I thought they were really appropriate, and they give this really kind of creepy vibe to this already quite creepy character. So I've made obviously quite a bit of progress on the hat, and like the shaping, I'm really happy with it. I'm very, very happy with this. Like, I'm going to be a towering figure when I wear this thing, because it is a lot of hat. And I'm also wearing heels with this costume. The hat is not quite complete yet though. There's still something left to do. And that is make the accessories. I've already started a little bit, and I'll show you the footage of that. But she's got this little like snake creature on her hat, as well as a little cartoony skull. So I've taken foam clay and I have sculpted both of these things, and they've been drying for the past, it's been over 48 hours now. So these are fully cured items by now. I use combinations, different sculpting techniques, mostly just hand stuff with a little bit of using the end of a paintbrush to get some of the rounded edges, and a lot of smoothing with water, and eventually I ended up with some shapes that I really, really liked. I'm particularly fond of my little snake friend. He is adorable, and the shape of him, because foam clay doesn't make too much of a mess, I was able to put it onto the hat to make sure it fit the curve properly. So basically, I rolled things out into a ball, I rolled things out into like a serpentine shape, stuck them together. The pieces actually turned out so smooth, I won't need to sand them. I can just get into painting them. And the skull is very similarly made, and I have these little nubs at the end, and I'm really happy with both of these pieces. And this is them now fully cured. So the next thing we're gonna have to do is get my acrylic paints out and just start painting them. I might add a few little textures here and there and some shading and such. We use acrylics because it's nice and fast and it goes onto this stuff very, very well. And yeah, that's where we're at. Oh, wait, no, I forgot something. There's other sewing left to do, and I've done those as well while I was waiting for that stuff to cure. I've gotten some ribbons, and in organza, and also solid satin ribbons, as well as some lace, and I've made tiny little roses. So I made some little lace roses out of itty bitty lace to make these little filler roses. They're not gonna focus, but these little itty bitty little roses. So I have 2 of these little guys. And then I've used organza for the majority of the roses, so 3 of them, because there are 3 visible and little blobby shapes on her hat. So I've made 3 organza roses, and the method that I use for this is actually a method I've learned at work. I kind of learned by looking at an example of a ribbon rose. Now there are multiple ways to make a ribbon rose. This is just the way I do it, and I had to like relearn it again because I haven't done it in so long. But really it's just a lot of folding and then pulling and stitching things down to make us eventually a little rose. I love the organza fabric because it adds a lot of different texture to the costume as well as just in general, and it looks really nice alongside the little satin ribbon. And all the edges are just burnt so I don't have any fraying happening because all this is polyester. So I have 3 main roses, and then I have a little satin rose as a filler, and 2 itty bitty little lace ones. I had a little bit of lace from when I was trying to figure out what I was going to be making the costume out of. I'm excited to finish the hat, and then I can get to cutting out fabric for the physical costume part, because I'm still just on an accessory technically, but I did know that the hat would probably be the longest part of this costume, so I got it out of the way. It's done, and it's a great motivator because it turned out really, really good. So yeah, I'm gonna finish this so I can get the hat done in the next few days, and then who knows, by the end of the week maybe I'll be working on the skirt. And once I get that going, I think it's gonna be pretty smooth sailing, hopefully. So, I now have the hat at this point. It's nearly finished at this point. You'll see I have all these little dangling threads, and that is because to glue these down, I used E6000, and it takes a little while to dry and to cure and everything. So I actually used some basting threads to like baste it in place. It's almost done curing at this point, but I am going to give it a whole other day before I start sewing on all the other accessories. The hat is almost finished, and we can kind of see what the final product looks like, and I'm ridiculously happy with it. I didn't know it would turn out this well, you know. It turned out better than I could have imagined, and I'm really, really happy with it. So that leads me to the next part that I'm gonna be working on. So off camera, I've gone and I have my serger over here, and I have serged all the edges of the upper skirt and the lower skirt. Rosie's skirt, it looks kind of like a modern mermaid skirt when looked at on surface level, but she's also a character based on the late 1800s. There's an upper skirt and there's a lower skirt, and that's where the mermaid effect will be coming in. The upper skirt is made up of 7 panels. It's going to have a placket on the back, and then there is a lower skirt, which is made up of 3 panels, and that is flared out and it's in a different color. So the first thing I'm going to be doing is going with the wine red, the same one that you see on this hat. I'm going to start with the center back, which is the piece with the most flare. I'm going to go up and leave about 8 inches open, and in there I'm going to put in a placket. I am not going to be putting any zippers in here because I feel like it just historically doesn't make sense there. I know, yes, I'm doing modern stuff in here as well, but the placket will just look really, really nice. I love putting in plackets. I find them super satisfying. So I'll be doing it that way, and in the end, you won't see this placket at all because it will be underneath quite a few very deep pleats. I'm going to do the center back first, and after that's done, I'm just going to seam together the rest of the seams and then press them open flat. Because of these serged edges, I don't have to do anything fancy like French seams or anything, and because of the nature of the skirt, that's why I wanted to do that. I want these to be nice and flat because part of it is flat on the front of my body. In the front, it's a lot tighter fitting. It's not tight, but it's closer fitting to the body, so if I did French seams or anything, you would see kind of bumps against my body a little bit. So I am doing serging for all the edges and pressed open seams for most of the seams here. When I get to that bottom skirt, I'll check back in and let you guys know a little bit more about how that one goes together, because it's a little bit different, of course, because we also have to deal with the hem. But for now, I'm going to get these pieces all put together, and maybe by tonight I'll have the top skirt started, hopefully. So let's go. Okay, so my skirt pieces are now made, or at least the top skirt pieces with plackets in. It's nicely hidden inside all these little pleats. It's kind of like part of the pleating system, which is really nice, which means that now I gotta work on the bottom skirt. So as you can see, it just kind of cuts off, right? So it needs to have a bottom piece, which is the flare piece that we saw on the mock-up earlier. So the flare piece is made up of 3 pieces, and the first thing I need to do is actually piece these together. So there's 2 side seams and a back seam, and I don't just attach them right away. There's a lot of stuff to do. Most of the detail on this skirt happens to go on this area. So I'm going to have to seam them together, and then I'm going to seam together 3 facing pieces as well. These facing pieces match with the bottom shape of the hem and has room for me to put on some horsehair hem to give the bottom some swooshy flair and such. This will hide underneath the facing, and it gets basically treated with the facing piece at the same exact time and gets hidden inside the facing. So when I apply the facing and the horsehair hem, and then I flip it up, and then I top stitch that all down, or at least that's the idea. That takes a little longer than it sounds like, but it'll be worth it to get some nice swooshiness into the piece. I'm making really fast progress on this so far, which I'm really happy about. Honestly, I think the hat, which is currently sitting on the arm of this camera tripod, is the longest part of this entire costume. It's taken me almost 3 weeks to do, while this, I have a feeling, is gonna take me a lot less. I have more than a month left to work on this costume because I want to debut it at Ottawa ComicCon, so I'm doing pretty good. Oh, I'm almost sitting on my cat. I have the skirt now finished with the hem on it, or the bottom skirt. So the horsehair hem is now attached to the bottom, and it's nice and like flouncy and stuff, which is great. The exact what I wanted. So now there's a few options I could go into, and that one is to make the ruffles that are gonna go on this skirt before I attach to this, or I could put the waistband on. Now at this point I've already sewn down the pleats and such, so the waist is actually already the size of the finished waist. So it doesn't actually hurt, because usually I like to do it for the hem first, because like put it all together, because it opens this up a little better, but it's already done up here and I don't really feel like cutting out ruffles and dealing with ruffles today. So we're gonna work on the waistband, which is also going to double as the belt. So the first thing that I've done, I have heavily interfaced, okay, put the cat down. So I have used heavyweight interfacing on both sides of the waistband. I'm not gonna make a separate belt piece because I might as well just make it one piece that goes on. It makes it a lot faster and a lot easier. One less piece is one less thing that I can forget when I'm packing this costume for a convention. But I do want to make it a little fancier than just slapping a waistband on there. So I have some cording. I'm gonna make some bias tape out of this fabric, and I'm going to make some piping. Now I'm gonna take the cording and place it in the middle of the bias tape, and this makes the piping trim essentially. Now you can buy trims like this, but I prefer to make them, especially because it will end up matching the fabric exactly. So I make this little trim, and I'll be using my zipper foot to do so. I'm just stitching it in there. And then I'm going to basically sandwich that in between the seams for the belt. So good side to good side, and in between that I put that little piping, and I go right against the edge with my zipper foot. I'm gonna feel right against the edge of that piping, the cording I put in there, and then I'll have a nice little sandwiched seam that sits right above and also below for the waistband. Now one reason I want to do this is because it will give the belt a little bit more dimension, or actually make it look kind of like it is a separate garment on top of this, and it will still be attached, it will still definitely look attached, but it will give it the illusion that it's a separate piece. It is a belt, not just the waistband. And also piping was very popular in the Victorian era, a little bit, you see it a little bit in the Edwardian era. Piping is just a really nice way to add a little extra something, a little extra dimension to something that is otherwise flat. And then we'll discuss the ruffles once I get past this part. But first, it's waistband time. It's been a little while since I've checked in, and that is because, well, Techathon weekend just happened, and in the past few days I thought I was just doing mostly prep work to get ready for the next steps, which is adding ruffles onto this, but the ruffles didn't work out. So I'll explain what didn't work out and what I am not doing, and then I'll explain what I'm actually going to do to amend this problem. I did a lot of circle math. I need 4 strips or 4 layers of ruffle or something, or black lines on this skirt, because the character does have 4 distinct lines. I did not want to just sew them in as color blocking. I wanted them to be more textured, more 3-dimensional. So I wanted to put a ruffle or a swag or something like that. So I went and cut out 2.5-inch wide circles. Essentially these long circles that were big and like this. So when you take a circular shape and you straighten it out, you get this little ruffly effect, right? And when you put that onto the skirt, it just gives it a little bit of flounce. A lot of math to get to the point of cutting these out. And then I took out my serger, and I serged all the top edges, the blunt ends, and then I also narrow hemmed the bottom so it would get even rufflier. And you might be thinking, Annie, these look great. What's wrong with them? Problem is, because it's circular and because of the nature of this particular fabric, when I put it through the serger, in some areas the fabric stretched out completely. So it's supposed to be about 2.5 inches wide. Some areas went as small. You can actually kind of see it here, shrunk. It pulled on the bias. I didn't account for that. It does not look good. Like if you look, it's way bigger here, way small. Do you see that? Look at that. It is super small over here and much wider here. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, it's really subtle. There's a lot of volume on your skirt. No one's ever going to see it, but I know it's there. And the skirt, the two most important parts of this costume are the hat and the bottom of that skirt. Yes, the whole thing's important, but when it comes to the silhouette of Rosie from Hazbin Hotel, these two elements are the really important ones. And the skirt is one of the areas I've put the most work into in both the pattern drafting, the making, and all of this. So this was not going to cut it. These are a dud, but that is cosplay. Some things don't work. Now, what will I do to amend this? Luckily, I have a crap ton of something called lace. 2 inches wide. And there is about 400 or so inches of this kind, about 200 inches of this kind. It will still have more texture. It will have a little bit of extra body. It won't be just sewing in panels, which I didn't want to do. Still a very viable way of doing it, but it's not what I wanted to do. It will add a little extra texture. I will be using this lace up on the bodice, so it'll be like continuous, it will be cohesive with the rest of the costume. But I now have 2 areas of the costume that will have the brocade in black, and then I'll have 2 areas that will have the lace on it, and they're separated from each other. The benefit of this is also that this is much lighter weight than the brocade would have been. So the flounciness will actually, in theory, stay much better on the skirt. So actually maybe this is a good thing in the end. I think it will still be really pretty. I'm just gonna top stitch it on the very, very, very top. It's like maybe more of an edge stitch. This will take me a little while, especially because I have to do some markings and such. And you know what? I think it's actually a very good save. I don't have to buy anything new is also the big thing. And then I can start thinking about attaching it to the main skirt. Okay, so the skirt is now all completely finished. I did a little try on of it the other day. I'm not gonna go too much into detail about it because there will be a reveal of the costume eventually at the end of this video, hopefully, once I debuted it. But we're gonna work on the next thing now. So there's gonna be 2 pieces. There's going to be a shirtwaist and there's going to be a little bolero that goes on top. Because I couldn't really figure out a way to combine the two without having some awkward seams, and it would be silly because the blouse would need a back closure and then the bolero would have a front opening, and then I didn't want to put a back opening. So yeah, they're 2 different garments. First thing I've done is I've cut all my pieces and serged all the edges. I'm not gonna be doing this the same exact way that I did my shirtwaist for my sakizo, but I am using the same pattern for at least the bodice section. The sleeves are different, but the main pattern is the same. But the way I'm gonna be making it is gonna be a little different. So I'm not gonna be doing French seams or anything, and that is why I've serged the edges. So the first thing I'm actually going to do is go onto the back and sew down the little tucks, which act as darts, so the back is more fitted while still being a little looser. And then I'm going to start to construct the pieces together and sewing down the side seams of the bodice. I'm going to be doing the little gathers and such by hand on the front of the bodice. I don't think I'm going to need to put twill tape for this one. We're going to have to see how it behaves, but I'll just essentially drape the shape down and then that will get tucked into the bodice later on. But this controls the shape of the gathers in the front. It's very, very similar to how I did the shirtwaist on sakizo, honestly. Okay, so the silhouette do be silhouetting. There is your Edwardian-ish shape, especially with that hat and the bottom of the skirt, so it's going well. Now there is the collar and yoke area that needs to be dealt with. Now Rosie has a black yoke with little squiggly lines, but there is a different way to interpret this, and that's the way I'm going to interpret it. Rosie is supposed to be based off of vaguely the Edwardian period, and usually these types of blouses that are kind of in this shape, if it has like a yoke up here, kind of similar again to my sakizo blouse, which is why I used the same pattern, there's usually lace or pin tucks and stuff like that up here. It's not usually just a different color with a little squiggle on it. So my yoke pieces are actually made of the same red color. The lace that I use in the hem is what I'm going to use to make it black. The idea is I'm going to play around with shapes, but I'm going to layer all of the black and then there's gonna be red showing through. To me, it's the leftover space from in between pieces of lace that make it have that effect. So that is exactly what I'm going to do to this. I'm going to figure out exactly how I want to lay it out, and it should have this really neat effect where you can see the red through it, but it's mostly black. We're gonna see how this goes. I think this is gonna work. I'm really excited actually to play around with some shapes and stuff. So big oop, I mostly did the rest of the bodice and also most of the bolero without really checking in. So I did film a little bit of the process here and there, so I'm gonna go over what I did to get to this point because now the sewing is all complete. So I wanna talk a little bit about what I did. And I am sorry I didn't film some of it. My brain went, I'm in con crunch mode. No, I was 3 weeks away from the con. That's not a con crunch. For me, that feels like a con crunch, and my brain also thought it was 2 weeks later. I literally thought I had a week left and thought I was con crunching. Anyway, back on topic. What I did do in that time, I finished the sleeves. They have a little puff at the top, tiny little puff at the top. They have a tiny bit of puff at the top, and that is just to give, because in this time period when they did have sleeves, sometimes they have a little lift. I also like a little lift in a sleeve if possible, especially when it's hidden, because it gives it a little bit more movement and it goes in a little bit better. I like the way it looks. Other than that, the sleeve is a little bit fitted and flares out a little bit at the wrist. It's very, very subtle, but it's there. And then I hand applied on this lace right here that is on the cuff. Just hand stitched it on with a little whip stitch that is completely hidden into everything. The back, I went and put some hook and eyes all the way across the back with about 3 fingers width apart towards the bottom and about 2 across the top. And they are in reverse order, so if one hook is going this way, the next hook is going that way. It is very secure. I can actually get into it on my own. It is not super easy to do, but I can. I would just prefer to have someone help me get into it. So other things that I have done is getting this little bolero done. So the bolero is basic pieces. It is a front piece, a back piece, and then sleeves, and the sleeves have a little cuff on them. There's no serging in this piece because everything is lined. So the front and back pieces, I did work on those twice because there is a lining and then there's a shell side. But something of note that I believe I did film was the piping process. So like the belt, I wanted to add piping so that there was a consistency with the piping throughout the design, but also because I felt it would just add a little something to make the bolero a little less flat. Because at this point, I've added elements to each part to make them less flat, and if I didn't to the bolero, besides textures, it would have nothing else. So I used the same elastic that's dulled out and has like no stretch, and made some piping the same way I did it on the belt with some bias tape, and then put it on to the piece. So first I put it onto the right side, and I had this nice stitch line to follow when I eventually put the lining on it and sandwiched everything together. So it actually went on super cleanly. I used my zipper foot and it went on quite nicely. I got to practice the little folded edge bit, because unlike the belt, this does not have a finished, it does not have like a blunt end. So there's just a little part right under the arm where one part folds under the other. You cannot even see it on here. It is so minor. This is the best I've ever done on that technique. Like, I can hardly even tell if this overlap is even happening there. And my reasoning for putting it where it is, you'd think, why isn't it on the back or something? Well, that's because it's under the armpit. My arms are mostly going to be down in this costume. It is the last place people are going to be looking when there's all of this to look at. The bolero was a very quick piece to put together. It's one of those moments where I finished it and kind of went, oh, I'm done all the sewing on this now. Now what? This is what I'm calling my Rosie box, because it's full of the things that I'm going to use to transform me into Rosie from Hazbin Hotel, the inhuman character from HE double hockey sticks. So I just want to kind of go over some of the things that I've bought to do this transformation, because I feel like that is part of the interesting points about cosplay compared to other forms of costuming. You're not aiming to be a historical lady, you're aiming to be a historical lady that is a word I can't use on YouTube most likely, that eats humans from HE double hockey sticks. I'm gonna kind of go over some of the things I got over here. Welcome to my Rosie transformation haul, I guess. So to begin with, like in most cosplays, you run into wigs. So this is a Jane Classic in pure white from Art of Wigs Canada or Vega Theatrical Supplies. By the time this video is out, they're probably not going to be around anymore. I originally wanted a more gray white color, but as Vega is going under, they have a huge sale, and this wig is the right length, and it's a beautiful white wig, and I know that I can work with this. This is gonna need some styling. I'm gonna get my crimper out. We're gonna do some things to this to make it more Rosie-esque. Of course, it's going underneath the hat, so the hat's gonna do most of the speaking. I'm gonna be styling it around that. But this is the wig I'll be using. This is the stuff I am less familiar with. So we're gonna start with something very notable on Rosie is all her teeth are sharp. So I have a lot of anxiety surrounding hurting and damaging my teeth. So I decided to go to a professional company to get my teeth options, and that is Scarecrow. They work really, really cool because they have this little putty in them, and it takes 5 minutes and you mold them to your teeth. I did it, and now I got a pair of double fangs for Rosie because I felt like it'd be more appropriate, as even though it's not every single tooth being sharp, it's sharper and there's more teeth that are sharp. So this is one of my nasty little teeth. I say nasty because again, my teeth marks are like molded into these guys now. These guys, they just go on like this. They're comfortable. I don't think I'll be able to wear them for a whole day. This is manageable. And they're staying in. I can talk with them on. And Rosie, this is one of the elements I was very nervous about, and I'm really glad I got figured out. Now the next element of note is one I'm gonna be a little nervous to experiment with, and that is the fact that Rosie's skin is gray. So I will be experimenting with Maron makeup. So I bought 2 colors, and I got these colors because it's got nice like gray color, a nice white color, and I'm getting major flashbacks to my Homestuck days. These are water activated. I've gotten some things to kind of work around with the water activation, some little spray bottles. I got a little extra pad, makeup pad, to cut little pieces out of these little knives and mix it together so I can make a custom color that is a much lighter gray. Now I chose these 2 colors based off of the We Love Colors tights chart because they have a thing with Maron makeup, because they make body tights and arm socks and all these things. And I've gotten a pair of their seamless gloves, and when their gloves are on your hand all properly, it's to be the same color as the combination of makeup. I'll definitely be putting nails at minimum onto these guys. That is where I'm at in the costume. Now it's figuring out these things. I need to do the wig. So next up, I guess I'm just gonna work on the wig a little bit. I'm going to get out a crimper. I'm going to play around with some styling, getting the curl out, and then playing with getting some new shapes in there. I don't know, I'm just gonna play around with some wig styling. I'm not the best wig stylist, so I'm not gonna give a full tutorial on what I'm doing. I'll try to get some progress and we'll see where I go from there. Getting really excited though. Con's only a little bit away now. This means I'm one step closer to getting to that point. So